Should we get to Trump caving? I think we got to get to Trump caving. My God, I didn't I didn't expect it to happen this quickly. I thought this process would take a little bit more time to register in the system. Okay. Now, what's going to be interesting is watching the right-wing base justify and internally process how this trade war went. Let me give you guys the update on Trump's beautiful, fantastic trade war. So, Treasury Secretary Bassett had a private meeting with a bunch of business leaders, big investment types, big money. Yeah. And the crux of the matter is that he said in the meeting that the trade war with the Chinese is going to be de-escalated. Now, he didn't exactly say how step one was going to lead to step two and was going to lead to step three. But from what we know is that the Trump administration is reaching out to the Chinese to tell him to reach out to Trump. That Trump's current dynamic or Trump's current attempt is the Chinese need to reach out to me, probably because of the imagery that would come with that or the signal that it would send. But all of these requests have been unreciprocated. At least the Chinese have said that they did not take, for example, JD Vance's comment that we don't need the products of like Chinese peasants very kindly. China doesn't have any midterms coming up. And because the United States was the aggressor here, I think that they feel a strong rally around the flag effect. Now, that's not going to last forever, but the United States, declaring not only trade war on China, but trade war on the world, probably, did not help to add to Trump's pressure campaign. And so now that we're 145% in, as in that's the tariff rate we've put on the Chinese, and the Chinese have put 125% tariff rate on us, and then have targeted specific sectors like Boeing, which is really big in the U.S. stock market and a lot of people's 401ks. Or, for example, a bunch of other, getting into the specific companies don't matter. Point is, picking specific sections of the American economy, like agricultural machinery or other goods, steel, copper, wood, stuff like that, and tariffing them and making it more difficult for it to be sent over to the United States. Okay. So, this is where we were. And the situation wasn't looking good. Because every day that a deal wasn't made, investors in the stock market got nervous. And so Trump had to go out there to try to keep the numbers up. And I think this private meeting by Bassett is another attempt to keep the numbers up. Because yesterday, at some points we were down another 3 points. We've had the worst April, the worst month in April in Dow history since, the 1930s. We've lost 9.6% this month. That's pretty big. And so it feels like as he's waiting for the Chinese to come and deliver him his victory that he did not plan for, and he's not coordinating with allies on because they're also countries that he's tariffing. He's waiting for the Chinese to come and deliver his victory, and he's signaling to them that they should do that. And the longer it doesn't come, the more nervous investors and consumers are going to be, the worse it's going to be for the stock market. This is an equation that does not benefit the president of the United States. Mind you, the United States has a massive consumer market. The United States has a lot of capital at its disposal. There are a lot of our economy that's really advanced, really top notch. There's problems with our economy too. But we have a strong leverage just due to the size of our consumer market, the size of our capital, who we are. The problem is we didn't lean into our advantages. Before, when Trump first got in office, we had 20%. China's export to the world, 20% of it was the United States. This time it's 13%. We took too long to assert that power, gave them time to adjust after his first wave of tariff. That was the first misstep. The second misstep was deciding to tariff everybody at the same time. So instead of stacking our leverage, for example, instead of it being the United States with 13% of China's exports, which 13% is still a lot of your market. You know, China's still a lot of our market, but it could have been more. For example, if we added Germany, France, or a bunch of American allies at the tippy top of it, if you were to get every single American ally and include it in this tariff regime against the Chinese, that would be 65% of their exports. Now, you're not going to convince every single economy, but let's say you convince, hell, just a fifth of them, let alone a half of them. That's a lot more leverage. But we decided to not only not coordinate with those countries, but make another mistake and decide to declare a omnipresent, all times, everywhere, all at once trade war with the world. Which means not only were we not coordinating, they were working against us. The Japanese, the South Koreans, and the Chinese, after we went and implemented this tariff regime, came together and agreed that they would work to increase regional trade. We were pushing them in the other direction. In fact, we were making it so the Chinese could think about them coordinating with other powers, not us coordinating with other powers. Our alliance structure and being the center of the global economy was our strengths, and we leaned into none of them. I'm not saying that I wanted a trade war with China. I really didn't. The American people wanted a better, stronger economy, and I did not think that a trade war with China right now is what's going to produce that. That's not to say that you can't like tariff any specific industry that's necessary for strong supply lines at home. But if you're going to do this, if you're going to go to battle for the United States economically, if you're going to engage in economic warfare, if that's your goal, then you need to go strapped. You need to go there with a plan. You don't need to go out there haphazardly using emergency declarations, which a lot of people, this is the subtext of this has been lost, but we've used emergency declarations to say that there's a national security crisis and we need to tariff the whole world. That's the mechanism Trump used to do it, because in other instances, it would be done by Congress. He's using emergency powers to do it. And then the national security crisis is spanning the entire globe, including Penguin Island. So the Trump administration needs to argue to me and you why sanctioning Penguin Island was a national security concern so powerful that he had the right to usurp Congress's power in asserting tariffs and taxing the American people. Because the tariff is a tax on the American people. That's what it is. You can describe it any other way you want, but that's in effect what it is. So we go there, we're not strapped, and then after we jump in feet first, feet first into hell, 90% judging of Vietnam's tariff resulting in 30 to 40% tariff rates on Vietnam, high tariff rates on this country, that country, 60 countries tariffs. We throw this out, throw that out, throw this out, throw that out. The economy, according to Trump, gets a little yippy. People get a little nervous. He starts backing up. And what do we see? Oh, well, when I said, when I instituted all these tariffs, including on Penguin Island, I totally had a plan. But let's reel in NVIDIA chips. Maybe that wasn't a... Maybe we should not be tariffing Taiwanese chip production since they produce 50% of the world's chips, and you need that in every electronic of import. Maybe that's not such a smart idea to make every electronic more expensive. Let's reel that in. Oh, wait. Are all the iPhones made in all the factories over there and you can't relocate them in a few months, meaning, iPhones are going to become how much more expensive? Okay, well, maybe not iPhones. I mean, even though that's exactly what Donald Trump's advisors, Navarro and others, who were all these people who were going on TV and advocating for the administration, they were saying, oh, we're going to have the little screws and we're going to screw it in America. And this was all for that. Oh, reel it in on the phone. Reel it in on this. Reel it in on that. And he started reeling it in. So when the stock started to go down, it started to go up again each time he would reel it in. And then when they would realize that, oh, he's stopping, it's starting to go down again, he'd reel in more. And now we're here at Secretary Bessent saying, okay, well, we're going to de-escalate. We just need the Chinese to initiate it. Then he turned to the Chinese to initiate it, and they don't initiate it. He trapped himself. And it's Trump's own ego that is the bars on his cage. And so Trump is trying to, in the best of his way, the best way he knows how, start to cave and back off even more. It's not even he started to cave. He started to cave when he started to reel back on the tariffs. Now he's in cave territory. He's deep in the cave. You can't see him anymore. Trump admits China's tariffs will drop, but it won't be zero. Trump's massive import taxes have roiled stock markets since he announced them on April 1st. President Donald Trump on Tuesday conceded that the 145% tax Americans currently pay for most imported goods from China will come down as a result of trade talks between Washington and Beijing. Speaking in the Oval Office after a brief swearing-in ceremony for the Security and Exchange Commission, Chair Paul Atkins, Chair Paul Atkins, Trump said talks with China were doing fine because everybody wants to have involvement in American markets. He also claimed that both he and the Chinese representatives would be very nice in an upcoming talk, but maintained that Beijing would ultimately be forced to come to some sort of agreement to bring down the massive tariffs he has unilaterally imposed as part of this unprovoked trade war with China and the rest of the world. Ultimately, they have to make a deal because otherwise they're not going to be able to deal in the United States. And we want them involved, but they have to. And other countries have to make a deal. And if they don't make a deal, we'll set the deal. We're going to be setting the deal, and it'll be a fair deal for everybody. And it'll be, I think it's a process that's going to go pretty quickly. What's the deal? Like, what are we getting? What's the ask? Do you guys know what the ask is? Is it remove China's tariffs on American goods? And if that's the case, would we remove our own tariffs in kind, which is probably what the Chinese would demand of us? And if that is the case, wouldn't that just increase Chinese and American trade, which would go kind of against the whole philosophy of what Trump's trying to do? Is he trying to end some of their business practices around intellectual property rights? Because multiple administrations, including his own in the past, have tried and failed to make any headway on that, but we haven't heard any signals on that whatsoever. I really have no idea what he's going for, but maybe that's part of the strategy. If he doesn't clearly define what the goal of all of this is, of hijacking the entire economy and making grandma's 401k, putting it on the leverage scale and hoping the whole thing doesn't tip over, and we don't even know what the goal is, because the goals that they keep expressing sometimes seems contradictory. For example, one of the main goals that keeps being put out is, hey guys, we're doing this because we love America and we want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. We want to build things here, cars and computers and such, not just be dominated by the service economy. You know, it's a similar, I'm not going to say it's the exact same, but you know, there's a similar vibe during the process of the transition from farming to factory work, where people were trying to fight their best to preserve factory work, preserve farms, try to bring farm work still in the United States, keep a decent part of the population employed. Some of this is the politics of nostalgia, and some of this is the politics of, you want things to be made here because it's a shorter supply line and you'd prefer it that way, or you want those jobs. And so you want those factories in the United States. So you put a tariff so that the foreign things are more expensive, making it so it's easier for the domestically made product to compete, because now it has a bubble, a market bubble that it is contained in and protected. And that might mean it could turn a profit otherwise in an environment when it would have not before. Now, of course, this is ultimately borne by the consumer, but the Trump administration thought that was worth it. But the Trump administration will, when asked if the tariffs are permanent, will say maybe, yes or no. They give an answer that basically indicates that it could be permanent or could not be permanent, which not only saps investor and consumer confidence, because are you going to invest in a country, in a new business making who cares, whatever it is, if you know that tariff could be removed in a week and then boom, you're no longer able to make that profitably, and now your investment's scrapped and you've lost a lot of money? No. If that's the type of way that the president's talking about the tariffs, it doesn't sound like he's committed. So why are you going to commit your money if the president hasn't committed himself? So that holds back the intention of the investment, as well as keeping us in this kind of limbo where this tariff has been placed. So we're feeling the negative effects of the tariff while not reaping any positive effects from the investment because they don't know if we're keeping it or not. But Trump's scared, I think, to completely back off of this idea. I mean, completely accept the idea, okay, we're going to have these permanent tariffs, because he also wants to use it as leverage. But in order to use it as leverage, that indicates that, you know, they would take them off, which again stunts the investment, which you can see the problem. He wants these tariffs to both be leverage in negotiations. He wants them to also be permanent, but he also wants businesses to know that he's going to remove them soon because they don't want the stock downtick and they don't want to pull bad on the economy. So he wants to do all these different things at once, many of them contradictory. It's like when the Trump administration talks about, hey guys, if the dollar is no longer the world reserve currency, it'll be like losing a war. It'll be like losing a war. That's how Trump described it. Then he gets into office and he starts talking about reducing, and people in his circle start talking about reducing the value of the dollar so American exports can be more competitive, which is one of the reasons why it's much easier to do service exports and producing the products here due to the dominance and strength of the dollar. You know, it makes the products more expensive and it's harder for it to compete on the international market. And by reducing the value of the dollar, those products could maybe compete on the international market. But that also means whittling away people's savings, which I don't think people are going to like, and targeting the world reserve currency status of the dollar, or at the very least putting it in jeopardy, which Trump himself said would be like losing a war. So where's the logic? Where's the economic logic here? Trump says he won't play hardball with China on trade. This is the cave. This is the cave. How do you cock your gun, get it ready, fire, you're 145% in on top of specific sector tariffs. You've jumped head first into this. And then you follow that up by saying you're not going to play hardball? What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, it's at least now we know, and I mean, we kind of knew this before, that some of the Ukraine negotiation kerfluffles is maybe not just, hey, we want to normalize with the Russians, but also just a complete lack of knowledge of what they're doing. The Trump administration on Tuesday signaled the possibility of cooling trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Investors are hoping for deals that might roll back the steep tariffs on Chinese goods. President Trump, in an Oval Office news conference, told reporters he did not intend to play hardball with China in making a trade deal. He also indicated that the ultimate tariff on China won't be 145%, though it won't fall all the way to zero either. Mind you, it wasn't at zero before the trade war. It was at like 20%. Much of the Trump tariffs that he instituted during his first term in office were actually kept in place by Biden. That's one of the areas where Biden and Trump probably had the most overlap, even if it wasn't always for the same reasons. But they both like the idea of manufacturing in the United States, which is why Biden put down a lot of money to try to subsidize manufacturing in the United States. I mean, the CHIPS Act is about making microchips in America instead of importing them from overseas, and working with companies like the TSMC in order to do it and to train American workers to do it. Now, Trump doesn't do as many of those types of subsidies, but it shows that they both had an interest in that. And so Biden kept much of those tariffs in. Not all of those tariffs, but much of those tariffs in place. And so with those tariffs in place, we had like a 20% tariff rate before we even escalated into this war. So I'm putting that information forward, because if this all ends and Trump's like, hey guys, 25% tariff, so we're back to where we started. If he goes, look, 50% tariff would be very difficult for the economy, right? But it would show the establishment of something new. It would mean Liberation Day meant something, and that it showed not only an escalation of showing like how far America would go, but a new standard for higher tariffs to try to encourage companies to bring their manufacturing over from China. Well, not the cell phones, apparently, or at least not yet. We're not this yet. We're going to make this exemption, this exemption, this exemption. But that's the idea. And if he goes back down to 20% or below 20%, who knows? Then we'll essentially know that he caved entirely. I mean, what is he going to get out of this negotiation in order to turn to the American public and say he won? And how difficult is his staff making this by throwing forward comments like Chinese peasants? We don't need products from Chinese peasants, which is what J.D. Vance said about the Chinese in reference to the trade war. Trump is not only losing the trade war, Trump has cornered himself and is now hoping that the Chinese will approach him to bail him out. And even if he gets bailed out, what is he going to be bailed out for? What is he going to be walking out? What was all of this going to be for? What are we getting from this? What did the risking of everybody's 401ks, all the investor confidence being sapped, all the consumer confidence being sapped, the inflationary effects, the effect on productivity, the effect on all the factory workers who have already lost their job because the imports they needed to make cars were just too expensive. That's happened in Iowa. That's happened in multiple states. We're just going to have to wait and see to see how much he caves. But I don't think Trump's walking away from this table with anything that justified this pulling of the pin on the hand grenade on the world economy and risking a recession and possibly still sending us into a recession because of it. Breaking news report. Elon, loser. More at 7. We know it's already past 7. Damn it. Never mind. No more.